Hey you! Yeah, you, pretending to read the book. Not the cat, but the cat is really cute actually. Yeah, you.
Oh,
Are you single?
how can you tell?
Well, because you've got a cat, you're wearing the I gave up pants. You make it really obvious. Oh, you've got your grocery shopping done for the week. You're hungry, huh? You want to make a salad?
Yeah.
Well, here's a whole bag of leaves that feeds a family of 4 perfectly. I hope you eat it quick enough that it doesn't turn soggy. Oh no! Look what you did by being single. You ruined all the salad leaves because you're a sad, pathetic, single person. Boo-hoo, you're the worst. Oh, you want to do some baking and have a nice little sweet treat, huh? Well, look at all these recipes. They're too hard to make smaller into a single serving. So you know what's going to happen? They're going to go to waste and get stale, and it's your fault for wasting all of those ingredients. You know what you get relegated to? The sad, lonely mug cake. That's all that you deserve. A mug cake. For losers. Because that's exactly what you are. You're single and you're a loser. You seem a little bit frustrated there, dearie. Well, luckily you can hop on over to the gym to work off this building sense of frustration with the world. What a shame that you're single, because if you were a couple, you could get a cheaper membership. So it looks like you're relegated to working out at home. You know what you get to rely on? Soup cans. Time to relax at home. But wait, you can't afford that, silly. You're single, and rent is astronomical, even for a couple. Looks like you're going to have to be a burden on your family, who will keep pressuring you to find someone and try and set you up with second cousins and friends of friends. Oh, it doesn't matter if you're aromantic or anything. Amatonormativity is the way the whole world is built. Everyone wants to live a nuclear family life, and even if you don't, if you're not coupled up, we're going to make it so hard for you to live that you're forced to turn to it.
I've been offered a comfortable home and protection. There's a lot to be thankful for.
Charlotte.
I'm 27 years old. I've no money and no prospects. I'm already a burden to my parents.
The way that the Western world is set up is very much around this whole nuclear family idea, as I have spoken about in my child-free video. The stage is set for essentially cis-het couples to just end up together, move in by the age of 25 preferably, pool your resources, get married, have kids, and then they go on to produce more kids and blah blah blah. Obviously, hopefully, not together. That is the setup that works incredibly well with capitalism, because you always have a workforce that is reproducing. But what about the fact that people are actually quite happy to stay single? What if people don't want to be in a relationship? What if people are asexual? Heck, what if people are polyamorous? This teeny weeny little box of what's acceptable doesn't really work for a lot of people, especially not these days. The term it's such a hard word to say. The term amatonormativity, said it, is the assumption that all human beings pursue love or romance, especially by means of a monogamous long-term relationship. The term was coined by Elizabeth Brake in her book Minimizing Marriage, Marriage, Morality and the Law from 2011. And if you're still unsure, go check out this awesome video by Tara Mooney, which is going to be linked for you down below. Just because I'm talking about this topic about how expensive it is to be single doesn't mean that I'm looking to get a divorce or anything. Don't worry, we're very happily married. He just doesn't like to be on camera. But I can say with 100% certainty, if we weren't together, this house, however like crappy it is, I would not be able to own it. If we weren't together, I would still be living in a flatting situation with multiple people, paying far too much for a place that is completely mold ridden. Like, that's the situation I'd be living in with no savings, okay? For context, I think it's really important to remind you that Brandon and I have been together for over a decade at this point, and we've lived together for 10 years. So we've had a long time of pooling our resources, pooling our assets, like everything assets I say, when it was literally just like secondhand furniture, and like able to actually buy groceries together. We always lived with flatmates when we were flatting and stuff, and we did that for over 6 years until we were able to finally scrape together a deposit to be able to buy this house, as it had like a leak coming through, mold infested, like the carpet was blackened. It was just, oh god. Anyway, it's the first time. I'm so fortunate to like actually own, most of it's with the bank, a home, because anytime we're like, oh, this place sucks, I'm like, we're not renting, because if we were renting, oh my god. I want to say as well, the mortgage on this house is cheaper than the rent that we were paying when we were even living with flatmates, okay? So We're going to be talking about that issue as well. I have a lot of stats, I've got a lot of figures here that we're going to be going over, so let's just jump into it before I rant on, okay?
Everyone I know is either getting married or getting pregnant or getting promoted, and I'm getting coffee, and it's not even for me. So if that sounds like I'm okay, then you can tell them I'm okay?
Let's look ahead to what the forecast shows for finances. Is that tornado on fire? Yeah, hi, welcome to being a young person these days. Isn't it fun? How much of your income should be going to rent or mortgage? There's the 30% rule. You've probably heard of it. So that means that 30% of your take-home pay goes towards rent or your mortgage. And that is the cap limit. You're not meant to go over that, but wow, especially if you live in Aotearoa, in particular in Auckland. Have you ever paid that little? Because no, it was well over half for me. Well over, God. I wanted to find out where this rule even came from. The 30% rule has roots in 1969 public housing regulations, which capped public housing rent at 25% of a tenant's annual income, which inched up to 30% in the early 1980s. Do you hear Reaganomics anywhere? Because I do. Rather than looking at what consumers should be spending on housing, however, the government selected these percentages based on what consumers were spending. However, like, we all know that the cost of living has increased, we know that wages have stagnated, if not actually reversed, and I want to remind you that if your salary or wage has not kept up with inflation, that is a pay cut, okay? Join a union, baby. Unions are amazing. We love unions here. I'm part of a union, very proudly. The typical American renter spent more than 46% of their income on rent in September, Benzinga reported, well above the standard 30% you would ordinarily budget for rent. Let's get to the juicy survey and unpack all of the wonderful data points that you were sharing with me. Thank you again. Huge thank you. 640 people. I was getting overwhelmed reading through them all. First off, geography. 46.6% are from the USA, 4.5% are from Canada, 9.2% from the UK, 3.9% Australia, 2.5% Aotearoa New Zealand, 1.3% Austria, 2.2% Finland, 1.9% France, 6.9% Germany, 2.5% Netherlands, 2.7% Poland. All of these other countries around the world too, which fall under the 1%. So I finally figured out how to actually select other for you to be able to fill it in on the Google survey after how many surveys have I done so far? So yeah, sorry. So now I can actually like represent exactly what country you're from. So we got there in the end. Wow. As you can see from this data, there is a heavy leaning on the USA, UK, Europe, Australasia. There were a few Asian countries and a few African countries, but it is mostly a Western kind of view on this. So bear that in mind as we're actually going through all of these survey results. I asked how much of your take-home pay goes to pay for your rent or mortgage. 32% was 0% rent-free. I put a lot of this down to actually living with family members, okay, because that's what a lot of the responses said. 0.6% were 1 to 10%, 7.5% are 10 to 20%, 14% were 20 to 30%. Now remember, 30% is where the absolute cap limit is meant to be for what you should be spending on rent or mortgage. That's meant to be the affordable limit in heavy quotation marks. 16.9% pay 30 to 40%, 11.4% pay 40 to 50%, 8.6% pay 50 to 60%, 4.1% pay 60 to 70%, 2.2% pay 70 to 80%, and 1.7% pay 80 to 90%. Truly, if you're paying over 50%, you are barely able to survive. And the people that are paying like 70% plus, how are you living? I just want to know, are you just eating dust? Is that how you get through? So as you can see from this, that's 44.9% of respondents are paying more than what is considered to be, quote, affordable for their rent or mortgage. That's nearly half of the people that responded. That's just for rent. That's not insurance, that's not taxes, that's not food, that's not utilities, nothing else. That is just for rent or mortgage. Unreasonable, unlivable. When I removed that 32% that had zero actually going towards rent or mortgage, that left just 22.1% of responses paying what is considered to be affordable to go towards rent or mortgage. Next, I asked what your living situation was like, and I really wanted to include an under 18 option, since that, you know, traditionally according to Gen X and Boomers that I've talked to, is when you get like quote kicked out of home unless you're studying. So I really wanted to make sure that like that was sort of there. 5.5% said I live at home with caregivers and family under the age of 18. 31.3% said I live at home with caregivers or family over 18. 3.6% I live in student accommodation. 11% I rent a room with flatmates. 1.7% I rent a room with partner. 21.6% I rent a place by myself. 13.5% I rent a place with my partner. 6.6% I own a place with my partner. 5% I own a place by myself. I'm not one bit surprised that nearly a third of respondents were actually living at home with their family over the age of 18. Doesn't surprise me at all. We've known for years about this cost of living crisis, and rent just keeps on getting more and more unaffordable every single year, as we will be talking about with data. Please don't see it as a personal failing when we're not being paid enough and rent and everyday expenses are far too high for people to be able to afford. So this is not a personal failing. This is a social, societal failing. This is what happens when profits get put over people time and time again. It has been so interesting actually reading your responses and how many people, like, the first time you move out is by yourself, because that is a completely alien concept to me. I thought that like everybody did the same thing as what all of us do here in Aotearoa, which is like you go out and you rent with flatmates. You go into like an existing flat with flatmates. Like you have a room, you rent a room, and that's it. When I moved out, I lived with strangers. And also back in the UK, it's so normal to have flatmates as well. So it was so jarring to me to see how many people were living alone or wanted to live alone, because you see this little tiny 1.7% sliver of people that like rent a room with their partner, but with other flatmates around. That was our situation. That's most couples, at least from what I know, here in Aotearoa. And it's so much easier with flatmates because there's normally already furniture there, because you're only paying for the stuff that has to go in your room, like your bed and like drawers or whatever that you may need. The cutlery is already taken care of. Someone else is normally on the lease, like, and there's also just other people around who can help with the chores, and you can even possibly like share food and like split those sorts of expenses. And also the utility bills, like you just split everything. It is so normal here that you do that. I just thought that everybody had flatmates. Like even on the TV show Friends in the 90s, they had flatmates, except for Ross, and nobody wanted to be Ross.
These flyers for me. No, Damon!
No one wants to be Ross. It's such a part of Aotearoa culture that you move out of home into this mouldy, cramped home with multiple flatmates that you pay way too much for. Like that is just such a standard here. I've just found again that we are weird here. No surprises. But trying to find a place that's just for me is literally impossible. There are no jobs anywhere that pay near enough to cover rent, let alone any utilities, phone, internet, or insurance. Not having enough income, according to letting agencies, to be able to afford renting a place on my own. The problem is that this is decided for us. There are specific rules and requirements that a person has to meet to be able to rent on their own, especially in London where I used to live. A massive issue was that if you're a single person with a standard monthly income, it's nearly impossible to rent a flat on your own. All of my single friends live with parents, all in mid to late 20s, and non-single ones live with their partner, otherwise they can't get by. That's from Australia. My personal preference as an aromantic introvert is to live alone, but that setup is financially unfeasible for most people I know in my city right now. Rent is the biggest issue for me. I live in an area where rents are high and it would really help if I had someone to split the rent with. Unfortunately, living with flatmates is not very common where I live. It's like you're expected to either find a romantic partner to live with or live alone if you can't. I also wonder if I'll ever be able to afford to buy a home in this area by myself. All of this contributes to me feeling like I should be in a romantic relationship, even if I'm not sure if I actually want to be in one. That's from Finland.
We'll be asking for first, last, security, and a small cleaning deposit. The total's at the bottom of the sheet there.
He'll take it. Sander, go get the furniture. I'll wait here. He's been living in his drunken parents' basement where something urinated on the hot plate.
Can we talk quietly over there?
Let's look at rent and housing costs in comparison to income globally. Now this is my favourite webpage whenever I want to prove a point to someone, okay, about how unaffordable it really is. I am not a data scientist nor a statistician. If you want that, go and watch Christine.
Let's do data. Yeah. Data.
But luckily The Economist has boiled this all down for us. Sadly, this data is from 2021, but it does a really, really good job at actually showing the level of growth in terms of like how unaffordable things have gotten. And I do recognize that costs have gone up even more since 2021. I'll have this website linked for you down below so you can actually play with the little graphic thing because it's really fun and also scary to play with. And you're just like, oh, that's how people could afford stuff 30 years ago and why we can't now. Great. I had a little look at some of the most popular countries from where you're actually responding from. And this is just looking at the rental price in comparison to income. In the USA, rental price is 15% overvalued. In Aotearoa, 72% overvalued. I can attest to this. In Australia, 47% overvalued. In Britain, 39% overvalued. In Canada, 78% overvalued. Wow, Canada, you're trying to beat us, eh? Germany is 27% overvalued, Finland is 8% overvalued, and the Netherlands is 18% overvalued. I really like this sort of data as it uses the income of the country as a measure of how unaffordable or affordable something is, you know. And when I say, because I do repeat this quite often, how unaffordable it is to live here in Aotearoa and how many people live in poverty here in Aotearoa and like the state of housing here. We're one of the very few developed countries in the world which actually don't have capital gains tax. That means that people have been buying up properties for many, many years, especially since the 1980s. So they have like 5, 6 rental properties which they're using as like their retirement fund or whatever. And so because they've all snapped up all of these properties, they've been renting them out to everyone. And yeah, 72% overvalued when it comes to rent. What's happened here with housing, same as in many countries around the world, is houses are actually viewed as investments as opposed to homes, as opposed to places where people should live. Personalize, make their own, make sure it's healthy. It's all about like getting the most bang for your buck as an investment, and I don't like that. I think that houses should be homes. What about your everyday bills? I mean, existing is expensive. Have you tried sleeping through breakfast to save yourself some money? Because a lot of different newspapers have been trying to tell you to do that. You silly, lazy millennials, if only you slept more. But then you're not working enough. What are we meant to do? I can't believe that the financial advice was to sleep through breakfast. The food issue is a biggie, and this came across the whole survey, with people struggling with food prices and then also having food waste because they weren't able to eat it in time. Exactly why I included that in the skit at the start. And it also kind of breaks my heart a bit, my little environmentalist heart, because food waste is like a really bad thing. Buying and cooking food for one, either buy in bulk and get bored or end up throwing the food away, or pay a premium for buying small quantities. Let's have a little look at the most popular locations from the survey, those global price increases for food. So in Aotearoa, New Zealand, annual food prices raised 12.5% over the last year, and it keeps going up. This is what you get when you have a duopoly. In the USA, it raised 4.7% according to the USDA, but that's on top of the 11.4% increase faced in 2022. In the UK, they had a 14.9% increase in the year to July 2023. Australia had a 10% price increase, Germany 22.3% price increase, Poland 18.9% increase, the Netherlands 13.1% increase. Like, there's many articles written about these sorts of issues, in particular when it comes to single people. In the UK, from this Guardian article, a single person spends on average about £1,851 on monthly household bills. But if you're one half of a couple, that works out to just £991 each. So there's an £860 penalty to being single. So I asked if you had an emergency fund, which is 3 months of expenses saved up. So 25.4% said, no, I struggle to get by. 29.6% said, not enough, but a small buffer. 17.3% said, sort of, but I have to dip into it. And 27.7% said, yes. I do think that a lot of us are actually aware that we are one bad financial event away from being without a roof over our heads, right? I think that a lot of us are actually aware of that, whether that is like major car repairs or you need to have a surgery done, especially if you're in the USA and you have to pay for all of that stuff yourself because you're like, everyone pays to breathe here, basically. Just over a quarter of people having enough for an emergency fund of 3 months savings. Most of those people were actually in a relationship. So hopefully this does really help to illustrate like how challenging it is to be able to afford Just 3 months of savings.
Do you both understand that I may not want a husband or a partner in my life? Oh, no.
Sunita.
Oh, Beta, I can't let you give up on a lifetime of happiness.
Rita, we just want what's best for you.
I know what you're doing. You always do this.
You're either with us or you're against us. This is the way. Now kiss. It's just, oh my god. In the survey, I asked, what relationship status are you? 40% are single, 5.5% are dating, 7.8% are in long-term relationship, not living together, 14.1% are in a long-term relationship and living together, 8.2% are married, 0.9% are divorced, 0% are widowed. I'm glad to hear it. 1.7% are polyamorous, 1.1% are polyamorous and living together, 8.2% are aromantic, and 12.5% are not looking to be in a relationship or live with anyone. Finding a new place made me realise that landlords prefer couples to rent because of the dual income and will not take singles living on their own despite the salary being above their requirements. And with roommates, I'm more easily accepted due to being single, and it's encouraged to be single while the people already occupying the space are already in relationships. Aside from that, I can hardly buy vegetables as they will go bad, and I'm just by myself. I was looking for 1-bedroom flats because I didn't want to live with roommates anymore. I realised that there are many more apartments for couples than for singles. People always ask me if I'm not lonely living without a partner. I just do not enjoy having another person in my safe place, even if I like them very much. But most of the stigma occurs when there is talk about future plans. Saying that I don't want to have a traditional partner is often shut down by saying think about it some more because it is so much easier with a partner. It is so expected for people to couple up romantically that it's like we don't really know how to handle it if people don't want to do that, and it's like they're happy not doing that. So as has been shown, it's extra hard for people if they don't want to be with someone because financially it's like you're kind of punished for not being with someone because you can't afford to live like without a partner. Banks favour people that are married. Everyone always sees married people as being stable. They're not flighty, and so you do get more opportunities if you're married, especially if you're a married man, because I've talked about all of the like ways that we get discriminated against because everyone's just like, you're just gonna have a baby, and it's like, what if I don't want to have a baby? How dare you not have a baby? It is kind of like there's this pathway that's sort of forcing you towards marriage, even if that's not really what would make you happy. Are platonic friendships not also valuable? I want to be in a relationship someday, but I want to be with someone because I enjoy their company, not because it's more affordable to live with someone else. And as I get older, it's becoming more tempting to settle down in order to be more financially secure. And as a woman who's attracted to men, settling for the wrong person can be dangerous. Having a romantic partner is looking more appealing just so I can have someone to split the rent with. I feel now that I probably would marry someone if it would improve my financial stability. While I'm very happily single, I found that when I have been in relationships, my costs were almost halved. It does make being in a relationship more appealing, and I've thought about entering into a partnership solely for financial reasons. However, I've deduced that the cost of living crisis is not enough for me to sacrifice my singlehood. It seems that it's a given that you should be in a relationship or want to be in a relationship. I'm on the aromantic spectrum, which makes it difficult for me since people always assume I'm either really lonely or quote picky. Let's chat about the disability stigma. My perspective cannot be divorced from the lens of my disability. There's some expectation that disabled people have able-bodied caregivers available, which is rarely the case. Even in dating, there's stigma around disability that makes it harder to find a partner. It means that a disabled person finds themselves in a very fragile living and working situation, with some sort of expectation that someone else is providing care, which they're not. Even to get a mortgage, the bank wanted my parents to sign off because they're totally allowed to discriminate against disabled people like that. The rules around disability benefits and relationships. I'm yet to find a system that doesn't discriminate against disabled people on benefits and relationships. I can't wait for true marriage equality to come into law, said as a queer disabled person. Whether it's your flatmates not being understanding of a chronic illness or disability, or the fact that you can't actually openly be in a relationship with someone without your benefits being stripped away, living as a disabled person makes life so much harder. I've got an entire video about the extra cost of living in an ableist society if you haven't seen it yet. The discrimination is actually quite ridiculous, and I was reflecting on this last night as I was having a cup of tea. It's like globally we're encouraged to partner up and have kids and keep that workforce coming, right? Unless you are disabled or chronically ill or you're on a benefit in any way. This is where I get a really strong eugenics vibe, and it's really ugly because you're actively punished if you're actually in a relationship with someone. So if you're not punished by having your benefit scan stripped away, they're punished in a way because they are seen to be like, oh, now they are your burden. Their expenses are your burden because living in a capitalist society, financial costs are a burden. You're making you entirely dependent on this person that could actually use this power against you. It's really not good. It's kind of like there's this active discouragement in a way, like you should be grateful to get anything if you get any benefit, but also you're undeserving of love. I think it is so disgusting. Honestly, I really wanted to highlight that because it frustrates the hell out of me. Also, the fact that disability benefit does not cover anywhere close to people's actual expenses for living.
I'm all alone. There's no one here beside me.
There are issues with being the only one paying for everything, but it's also a struggle having nobody else to help around the apartment. I have a disability related to my back that affects range of motion, and sometimes it would be nice if I didn't have to do all of the housekeeping, the shopping, the meal preparation. The number one time I wish I had a partner is if I get sick, especially in the middle of the night. It's just very lonely to be sick and on your own and have no help with cooking and cleaning either. You're on your own with every expense. You don't have a partner or partners to help you out. At the same time, can't make enough money on your own to get by properly. It's scary and easy to get into debt, either from a bank or from a parent who loans you some money. Singles, for whatever reason they're single, have a hard time getting by themselves, and they have to rely on other singles sometimes, who also can't get by alone. All of my drive to be married came from living alone for 2 years. Here, in Austria, past a certain age, it's socially frowned upon to live in shared housing with someone who you're not in a romantic relationship with. Even though with today's rise in loneliness and increasing costs, it would make much more sense. Some people absolutely thrive, like you are sliving living alone, and I think that's great. I'm so glad that people are happy and they found exactly where they want to be, and I think that that is awesome. There were also a lot of people struggling with this sense of loneliness and having this sense of self-reliance constantly, like you have to do everything yourself. Now, loneliness isn't that often talked about. I mean, I have made a video on it, but it's something that people don't really want to talk about because it makes people quite uncomfortable to talk about, because the solution is obviously spend time with more people. How are you meant to spend time with more people when we're so time poor? Because we spend all our time at work or commuting, and then we're completely burnt out by the state of the world. It's like, it's really, really, really hard. A lot of people are actually raising the level of awkwardness from people if you are a single person in a group, like how othered you are, because it means that there's an odd number. And may I just remind you that the Spice Girls were at their absolute peak when there were 5 members. Odd numbers are good. This just comes back to my whole hyper-individualism is bad, community, friendships, platonic relationships are great. And this is the stuff that we need. I feel like hyper-individualism has been pedestaled for so many generations at this point, but no one can do everything alone. I think it's really important to recognize that and just say, like, you know, even how like the 40-hour work week, like that was relying on someone doing a whole bunch of unpaid labor. Of course you're not able to like feel like you can do everything. And it's also why I think that platonic relationships should be given the same sort of like level of respect as what like romantic ones get. There's a lot of issues with how society sees and pedestals romantic love at the same time as hyper-individualism is what I'm saying. What we actually need is community. I also think that a lot of this comes down to third places being basically removed, you know? Like the barrier to entry to hang out at a third space is too expensive for most people these days. So like if it's after work or on the weekend or something, it's like you want to go out for brunch, that is very expensive. Where do you actually go to hang out for free with your friends where you don't really have to spend much? Maybe it's a coffee, but I don't drink coffee, but it's not really anything that you're actually doing. Like malls used to be the place that people would go in like the 80s, even in the 2000s, that's where we went. We didn't really spend any money going there. It's just like you walked around and had a look at places, but that's also based on consumerism and I'm really not here for that. Libraries, you can't talk at, and a lot of libraries have begun shut down. Like, where are third spaces that people can go and hang out? It's kind of like because you're spending so much time at work and then your only other place is at home. So I do understand like this want to be able to like carve it out, to be able to make it into a place of rest, because you're constantly available for work, right? We're all working more hours, productivity constantly goes up. I think that this hyper individualism that has been platformed so much kind of creates this stigma around having flatmates, which is really unhelpful. Apparently in the US this is very common to like look down on people if they have flatmates. Flatmates, shared housing, this sort of community thing, it's not a shameful thing. It's so weird to me that that is seen as a shameful thing, because it's absolutely not.
I'm not so sorry.
I'm not with anybody. I'm here solo.
Sorry. Let's start it again. I'm Becca. This is my husband. You don't have a husband. Sorry.
Let's talk about the shame nation of being single, because so many of you were saying how much your family members, your friends, your co-workers even, inappropriate, were trying to pressure you into getting into a relationship. Now I really want to talk about this in my other video that I will be working on, because I know that people wanted to talk about it, about the changing state of love, so I'm going to be including that there, but I just wanted to show some responses on screen about how much shame is actually given to people if they are not in a romantic relationship, but thereby not actually continuing on the life that they should be leading. You know, it's holding you back by being single. Where's my grandbabies? All of that rubbish. Especially if you're a woman. There's a lot more shame tagged on being single if you're a woman.
Home together. Yeah, so we actually were roommates. We worked very well together as a unit, so we decided to actually make an investment.
Together, Amanda Schneider, age 30, Kathy Keel, 30, and Stephanie Vandergrift, 28, bought this Tennessee house in May 2020.
What about if you want to buy a house with your friends? Now, this has been something that people have been doing over the past, like, 5 years in particular, because of, like, the cost of living has just gotten harder and harder to actually keep up with. So why not actually get the benefits of marriage by combining your assets with your friends and actually buying a house together that you all enjoy living in? What's so wrong with that? Well, you see, there is this contract thing that happens when it comes to a marriage, also based on true love, of course, but the contract is really important, but friendships don't really come with that. So there have been people that have been successfully buying houses with their friends. Now, same as if someone's thinking about getting married or something, I would always be like, prenup. Brittany has shown us it's a really good idea to do that. You know, like actually think through every single possible scenario, draw up a contract, all that sort of stuff.
Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
What if you're stuck in the middle of being in a relationship? What if you get stuck in a relationship because you can't afford to leave them by living alone? This is where it's pretty bleak. I feel like I want to leave my relationship, I just can't afford to. I'm only managing to save now because I'm sharing costs. If I was having to pay for all of it myself, I don't think I'd be able to save much at all. There have been many times I searched for a place on my own, but ultimately still remain with/live with my partner due to cost of living without splitting rent, food, being taxed as common law, etc. Yeah, the tax thing really bothers me, how much that benefits like married couples. We don't get that here. This really did break my heart because people were staying in relationships even if they want to be out of them and like be out of that living situation. They were staying there because they can't afford to leave. Now this just got like the bells of the past ringing in my head, because do you remember back when women couldn't have a credit card? Do you remember when banks could discriminate against single women? Do you remember how husbands were having to be asked if women could get medical procedures? Oh wait, we're still there, that is still happening. It just, all of this progress, and yet we're still in this position because women still, on average, get paid less than men. Even if they're doing the same job, don't come at me. It's been proven, okay? This is how people can sadly get stuck in abusive relationships. If you're any kind of marginalized community, your risks are so much higher because your earning power isn't going to be higher. People will probably not believe you because, hey, people just love to be like this, especially when it comes to DV and stuff. Because as the cost of living goes up, it just strips people of this ability to actually be safe. And that's really unacceptable.
Tough to be single around this time of year, so.
Why do people always say that? The holidays is the best time to be single.
Parties every night, free-flowing booze, Santa's beard tickling your inner thigh.
Some places are actually super chill about people being single. In particular, Germany stood out to me from what you were actually responding. Like, I think that that's amazing. Like, people were living alone and stuff, and people don't even care. It's not even like a blip. It doesn't bother people. They don't find any stigma, which is great. And there was someone from Ukraine that replied saying that if you had a middle class family there, like a lot of the families would actually have a place for you to be able to live, like if you were in a student accommodation or something. But because of the war in Ukraine, which is still going on, people have had to obviously flee for their lives, literally, and have to travel to Western Europe, and the cost there is so high. If you are in a couple, you're able to actually afford to be in a place together, but if you're single, like single people have had to band together to live in flats together because the costs are too expensive for what they can actually afford. Time for my final thoughts. And some people may not like me for what I'm going to be saying in this section, so we'll see who can actually make it to the end and think about it first. I want to start off with a quote from one of you. Living with platonic housemates is considered weird past a certain age, which is unfair. Like, I should have the option to live alone if I want to, but I should also have the option to live with friends for the rest of my life without people wondering if something's wrong with me. Anyone want to buy a large block of land, build tiny houses powered by solar, and grow our own food with me? It sounds very solar punk, by the way. I'm very aware of this climate crisis that we're currently in, which is only going to get worse year on year. And I'm also very aware of the fact that we've got a housing crisis in many places around the world where there are not enough houses for the people that want to be able to live there. And then you combine the climate crisis with that, and we're going to get a lot of climate refugees from the climate crisis. And I really want climate refugees, same as I want refugees from any situation, to be able to actually have somewhere safe, warm, dry, okay for them to stay. You know, like I'm a big advocate for that. I know that some people have a problem with that, but I think that we should look after each other. I don't see that as being like a bad thing to say. When it comes to the amount of people that want to live completely alone, I don't know if we're going to be able to fit everyone that wants to live completely alone with the situation that we're facing of like societal collapse. Maybe I'm viewing things through too much of a doomsday lens, but also because Brandon, right, he's a civil engineer and he's been doing that work for what, 15, 16 years? He builds housing developments, right? And so he works with developers. And you know what developers want to build is family homes. Developers do not want to build homes or places for single people to live in because they don't make as much money, and also because they're too expensive for single people to be able to afford. Whilst there's a market there, the cost that the developers want isn't there. And because we don't have government actually being like, you need to build more affordable housing that isn't just based around the nuclear family, it's like that doesn't really compute to a lot of business people, it seems, because you get more money from a single detached family home. And that's another reason why I was saying like, living with friends is a good thing. Like, imagine if the way that housing was built was actually designed in that way to actually have friends living together as opposed to like a family living together. So like in each person's bedroom there was also an office nook because so many people are actually working from home now. And if the kitchens were a bit bigger, those are sort of like the long-term solutions I'd like to see. But I also really want this stigma around flatmates to go away. Given the fact that so many people were replying saying how much they like to be alone, it's like, yeah, so if you also have a flatmate that likes to be alone, you both like to be alone but together so then you can share some of the expenses and stuff. But that could just be me trying to find like any sort of solution to the crisis that people are facing right now. But also it's just because this hyper individualistic lens of like, if you have flatmates then you're a failure, I think that's disgusting to me. Like, I really don't like that. Having flatmates at any age I don't think is a bad thing. In fact, it more builds community and actually kind of like looking after each other in a way. I don't really see that as being like a really terrible thing. There are definitely instances where it's safer for people to live by themselves. There are people that have like mental health conditions that mean that living alone is like the best thing for them. Personally, I'm a very big fan of communal housing. So, you know, like if housing is actually built around, think about like those retirement villages, which aren't really retirement villages. It's like you have your own little place to stay at, and then there's like a community garden there, and then there's some shared facilities everyone can participate in, like that sort of thing. So it's like you can be alone, but it's like also very much about togetherness, because community really is the thing that's going to get through the bleakness that is coming. Like we've seen all of the terrible weather events, right? I'm fully here for people living their best single life, and if they don't want to be in a relationship, I don't think that people should have to be in a relationship. I think that platonic relationships should be way more valued than what they are. Another thing is keep advocating for universal basic income. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but UBI is one of the best things that we can actually do to look after people. Everything I said in the Ableist Society video, all of those recommendations, they all fit very well here as well. Another thing is rent control. Rent control is something that should be pushed for a lot harder. So if there are petitions going around, definitely sign them. Ask your local MPs, like the people in your local government, whatever you call them in your country, ask them to actually put in place rent control. Push for that sort of stuff. Same as capital gains tax. That should actually be a thing here, please and thank you. Like, there are a lot of things that we can do, but the thing is that most of them are long-term things, which is exactly why I'm sort of like removing the stigma around living with flatmates. I think would actually be really helpful for the short term to help people be able to actually pool their resources a bit better and be able to get out of like bad situations. Like if you're living at home and like your family is really awful, don't rule out flatmates. I don't think that, like, flatmates can honestly be great. Same as if people are stuck in abusive relationships. Again, I will advocate for flatmates once again. Of course, interview them, see them in person, all that other stuff. Like, I don't know what other solutions I could suggest for immediate right now. I really don't. And if you have suggestions, I would love to hear them. Like, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, what emoji should we leave? Like a couch? Because that's one of the things you have to lug around from rental place to rental place, and it's always really, really hard to. You have to rent a trailer and everything. Let's do that. Thank you, lovers, so much for watching. Hopefully you still like me after this. Maybe this is just because I live in Aotearoa and we have a bit of a different view on things. I don't know. But yeah, take care of yourselves. I'll see you again next time. Bye.